Hi, welcome to Draw Plans. I'm Tom Norris, and for today's tutorial we're looking at party wall agreements. A complex issue. Most people don't know what they are, and can be tricky and can be very expensive and can have a huge impact on some of the projects. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you an indication as to the circumstances where we need a party wall, and for that I'm going to look at one of my projects here. So this is a ground floor layout plan for where we're adding a wraparound extension. So for example, if we look at it here, let me just select a pointer. If I look at it here, that's the existing wall. So this is a semi-detached house. There's a property here and there's a property here. However, there's an alleyway, meaning there's a bit of space left. And I'm going to show you the circumstances as to why we need a party wall agreement for this project. So the rules of the party wall, they say that if you're going to, this is to do with excavations, yeah? If we excavate to build another building, or if we excavate below the foundations of the existing property, we need a party wall agreement with the neighbours if that excavation is within 3 meters of their property. So in this particular case, we're building on the boundary here, and we're connecting up to the existing property. And of course the neighbour's property is right on the boundary as well, so we're actually right on top of it. So effectively we definitely need a party wall agreement with these neighbours. On this property, because the neighbours have a property here, there is only 1 meter between our excavations and the neighbouring property, so once again we need a party wall agreement. So in other words, for this particular client who wants to build a wraparound extension to his property, single story, he needs a party wall agreement with the neighbours on both sides. So what I'm going to do is have a little look at the location plans here. We can do that. Then I'll give you a better idea as to what's actually needed. So if we look, let me just pull in another location plan. So this is actually the property in question, and if we look at it down here, we're going to build in this area. I'm going to go around. It's going to be a wraparound come down. Now we're showing blank here, but in fact a house has been built on this property since this particular map or location plan was created. So we actually need, as I say, a party wall agreement with both properties. Now the party wall agreement isn't that complicated, but it may seem so at first, and I'm going to give you a little breakdown as to what's involved in a party wall agreement. In other words, an intro into the rules. So the rules are effectively pretty simple. If you're going to do any structural works on this property that relate to the party wall, and in most cases they would, if you wanted to take out, say, the back wall or the front wall or a supporting wall in the center of this property, it means that you're going to have structural transference, or the loads are going to be transmitted. You're going to have a bit of steel perhaps. The steel is going to be going into this wall. So if you carry out any structural alterations to this wall, you will need a party wall agreement. So you don't have to do any excavations. This is to do with structural alterations of your property. So if you take out, for example, the back wall going to the garden and you put in a big lump of steel, well then that steel is going to have an impact on the end bearings, and that's going to impact on the boundary wall. And if you take out a chimney breast, for example, that's going to have an impact on the boundary or party wall. So you need a party wall agreement to do it. And if you don't do the party wall, if you don't set up a party wall agreement, then it can be quite nasty, because it means that midway through the work, if your neighbours haven't been informed and they're not happy with what you're doing, or getting excited or getting worried, then all they have to do is call planning or building control. In most cases it's building control. Someone comes down, and if you don't have a party wall agreement in place, they'll put a stop on all work until you do, and that could take a month or 2 months to organise. So you really would be in trouble if you were taking out chimney breasts and the neighbour complained to building control, which of course they're entitled to do, because you haven't done what you're supposed to do. That's the legal framework for a party wall agreement. So you can't go taking out chimney breasts, can't go doing any kind of alterations that will impact the boundary shared party wall, because it has an effect, or may have an effect, on this particular property next door. So you got to be the good citizen, the good neighbour, and be neighbourly, which means getting the party wall agreement, or getting at least notifying them of the party wall, notifying them of the building work. So how this works, in effect, is a party wall agreement comes in two stages. Two main stages. And the first one is where you actually serve a notice. Now your builder won't know anything about this, but your architect may be able to sort out a notice for you. If not, you're going to have to instruct a surveyor, and they'll deal with the notice. So the notice is basically what it is this is a sample notice now. Yeah, this is one we sent out. So we basically act. I'm telling them we act for your neighbour, and I'm saying, based on the party wall legislation, etc., we hereby notify you that we're going to do blah blah blah. And we tell them what the work is, give them an idea. In this case it was a single story extension, a drop curb, and some landscaping works. And I'm giving them a time frame as to when we're likely to do the work. Excuse me, I just had a big yawn. I'm tired. So what you're doing is you're asking them to sign and return the consent form, and you're giving them 14 days to do it. So normally what we do is we create the party wall notice, and then we give it to the client. And the best way of then moving forward is for our client, to then go and see the neighbour, give them the notice, which this is, give them a copy of the notice and a copy of the letter that goes with it, that they're basically meant to sign to give consent. And at the same time, they explain what the job is, what's going on, and give them copies of the plans. And then you let them be, because they now have 14 days to decide. Well, I would imagine that in about 50% of the projects we're involved in, the neighbours will sign. They'll give the consent. And it's usually, if the neighbours have had work done themselves and understand what the rules are, or they've had previous experience of a party wall agreement, then they'll usually okay to sign, if there's an element of trust there and they're content that the work is very, very unlikely to have any impact on their property, or if the neighbour consider that their neighbour is responsible, then they'll probably just give consent. Older people tend to do it with older people. That happens a lot, but the younger ones, they get worried. They're worried because it's a lifetime investment, a house, so therefore they get a little bit worried as to possibly what could happen, and so they dissent to the notice, which means they're not content with to sign the notice. And when they don't, it means that they basically let you know. Well, if they don't send the notice back signed, then effectively that means that they don't give consent. And if they don't give consent, then those neighbours will generally hire their own surveyor. And within the notice that you give, Like, for example, in the event of any dispute between us under the Act, would you be willing to agree to the appointment of an agreed surveyor? Now, what they're asking there is they're saying, well, look, if you don't want to give consent, would you be happy to use the same surveyor as we have? So in this case, they were using myself, and if they then are happy to use me, then I become what's known as the agreed surveyor, which means I will act for both parties. And under the party wall legislation, a surveyor can act for the two parties without any issues. So in this particular case, I can't remember what actually happened on this one, but the agreed surveyor is where I will then act for the neighbour, and I'll act for the house or the what's known as the building owner. In other words, the property that's actually doing the work. So I'll act for both parties. And what normally happens then is before any works take place, what I have to do then is agree a survey date to go in and have a look at the neighbour's property, and to carry out what we call a schedule of conditions. So in other words, I take loads of photographs and make lots of notes as to the condition of their property. Now, that can range from from the decor to the looking for structural cracks, to the state of the roof, the tiles, all in the areas close to the boundary. So the boundary wall itself, the fencing, the patio, the brickwork, absolutely everything gets taken in. So we look at that and we take photographs, and that'll be at the back. The entire wall, we're looking for cracks, so we take loads of photographs inside and outside, front and back. And in some cases, some of the surveyors will use drones to to get detailed photography from the higher elevations. So it's not uncommon now, it's happening more and more. So they effectively, you can see how in certain properties, especially as you go into central London, where there's millions and millions, worth millions and millions of pounds, the surveyors will be using that kind of technology to prepare very detailed surveys. But so as a general run-of-the-mill, you do the schedule of conditions, and then what you do is under the Act, and I would be, as I say, in this case, let's assume I'm the agreed surveyor for both parties. So I do the schedule of conditions, and then I start. You've seen the schedule. This is the schedule. This is, I think, this is a very simple one. But this is not the schedule. This is the notice. Schedule is an entirely different matter. That's just like a survey and a list of all the defects and the conditions of the property. That's something different, which I don't have. I don't have one of those to show you. So once we've got the schedule of condition, what look to do then is do a draft award. So now I pulled up in another one. This is a draft copy of an award between the building owner and the adjoining owners of a particular property. And this is how it goes. An award under the provisions of the Party Wall Act, etc., etc. And then you describe the people, their names and their homes and the addresses and the dates. And you say who the surveyors are, etc. And we scroll down. Lots of details here. What they're basically worried about is that you'll damage or cause damage to the neighbour's property. So you have to basically make sure that doesn't happen, or if it does happen, you have lots of photographs and detailed information so that you can have liability for the building owner, who will be responsible for any damage. So you basically give details about the schedule, when it was taken and so on. You have a look at the drawings supplied by the building owner. You check those out, and you make sure you have the details for those drawings, the drawing names, the title, the dates, lots of specific details. And you start to create the award based around the details of the actual project. So in this case, excavate within a distance, blah blah, build a new wall and foundations to the approval of local building control. Yes, all of that is pretty much standard. And then that no deviation from the agreed work shall be made without prior written agreement. In other words, if anybody changes their mind about anything, it has to be introduced into the award. If not, there can be a problem further down the line, like damages and so on and so forth. So all of the work be paid for by the building owner, carry out the work as per the drawings listed on the document register, take all reasonable precautions, provide all necessary precautions or protections for the adjoining owner's property. And then you start to go into detail about the actual work, about if there's scaffolding, for example, about the ladders and about access to the scaffolding. If the builders need to go on the neighbour's property or remove fencing, you have to give specific details as to what's to be removed, how much access is allowed into the neighbour's property, during what hours, for how long, as in weeks or days, or and of course all of the neighbour's property, the patio, the tiles or whatever it might be, plants, etc., have to be protected. So sometimes you'll end up with a wooden hoarding at the back of your garden to allow the builders to come into your property, say a metre or so, to be able to build a wall, and then they have to reinstate all that afterwards. Take the hoarding down, make sure the wall is fine, clean up all the patio, put back any flowers or plants that get destroyed, etc., etc. So it's pretty much detailed. Making sure that you don't block up the neighbour's drains or gutters or anything like that. So what else are we talking about? Compensate the adjoining owner for any loss of damage. Yes, that happens. Fully indemnifying the adjoining owners from liability in respect of any injury or loss of life. Any tradesmen that get hurt needs to be, it's the responsibility of the building owner and not the adjoining owner. They have to have insurance for that kind of thing. Carry out the whole of the works as practicable from the building owner's property. In other words, do 98% of the work, do all of it from the building owner's property if possible, but if access is required, then that's what you have to do. You have to set up the notices required. You can't just go in and do work whenever you feel like it, and all of this is set out in the party wall agreement. Permit the surveyors to have access to the relevant part of the building owner's property at all times during the works. So in other words, if there's any concerns by the adjoining owner, all she has to do, or all he has to do, is call their surveyor, and the surveyor will then go down and have a look on site, and they get access and report back. Require precautions to be taken that any scaffolding or access platforms, blah blah, do not prejudice the security of the adjoining owners. That's all pretty common stuff. And also one of the things that comes up all the time is method statements. In other words, sometimes people will want to know, or the building owner, or not the building owner, but the adjoining owners will want to know about the access for the scaffolding, how it's brought in, how it's erected. So they'll look for a method statement. They may also ask for a method statement for the building work. In other words, what happens first, when does that happen, what happens if, and so on, so that they have detailed knowledge of what's going to happen. Scaffolding, they're just saying here about kickboards, reinforced protective sheeting to the sides of the platforms to make sure that the dust and the debris and all the rubbish doesn't fly into your neighbour's garden. And then when it comes to the foundations, usually if there's a building right on the foundations where the building owner is building, they might have to be done in a hit and miss basis, which means you can't just dig out willy-nilly. for the foundations all along the length of the neighbour's property, because their house could fall down. So you have to do it under hit and miss basis, which means you dig out a metre, and then you fill it in concrete. You miss a metre, dig another metre, and so on. So you do every second one until it's all done. But you do no more than say 2 in the same day. Then maybe a couple of days later you do another 2, and then a couple of days later until you're done. So yeah, it says here, allow the concrete to cure for at least 24 hours. So if you finished it on a Monday evening, you can't do another one on Tuesday because that's too soon. You'd have to give it the extra day. When it comes to excavating again, no excavation is to remain open for more than a couple of days, nor over any weekend. Or during wet weather, because when excavations occur and it's raining and they're left open for a long period, houses and the ground starts to move because there's a space to be filled, so it can cause problems to the neighbours. So this is all pretty important stuff, yeah. So again, this is about the back of an extension, that you have gutters, gutter brackets, copings, foundation, vents. Nothing shall project or discharge into or over the adjoining owner's land. So you can't, in other words, you can't put up a back extension and then put a flue on the side going into your neighbour's garden. That would be that's not on. You can't do that. So those are the kind of things that are covered, and even when it comes to removing the scaffolding, clear all away, dust and debris, yeah, usually the same thing. But it relates to absolutely everything, and it also relates to the timing, meaning you don't work on weekends, you don't work with a big drill before 8 o'clock in the morning. Sometimes you're not allowed to use vibrating power tools on the party or boundary wall. You have to do it by hand, which is a hammer and a club hammer and chisel to cut your openings, because the vibration of the big kangos can actually cause problems on the wall. What else? You can see now already it's pretty lengthy, so that, yeah. See, they're talking about the NYSE works here, 8 o'clock, 5:30, no work on weekends or bank holidays, Saturdays up until 1 o'clock. And then once you've covered all that, in my case, for example, on this particular project, I was the agreed surveyor, which means I only had to agree it with myself. So this was a very easy one. Normally what will happen is where you have 2 surveyors, then you draft out a document such as this. It's called a draft award. And then I send it over to the other surveyor. The other surveyor will send it back and he says, I'm not happy with that, not happy with this, change that. And you effectively go back 2, 3, 4. I've had it go back 10 or 15 times between surveyors. So they keep going back until we agreed. And then like this, for example, building owners pay the adjoining owners. Yeah, this actual draft, that was the fees for the adjoining owners surveyor, 2,250. So it gives you an idea how the fees can add up. So the other surveyor, in other words, I wasn't the agreed surveyor for this project. I was the building owner's surveyor. So the building owner has to pay us. And then he also had to pay for the surveyors for next door. And in the event of damage being caused or other contingencies or variations, a further fee shall be payable at a rate of £180 per hour plus VAT. Now, that's a stomach churning amount, because you can be there for a morning on something trivial, and it's costing you £1,000. So yeah, so don't mess with the party wall surveyors. That's all I can say. That the drawings produced by others and included as part of the award, accepted by the 2 surveyors in good faith, taken as being accurate and properly showing the extent and detail of the works, which form the subject of this award, that the surveyors reserve the right to make and serve any further awards that may be necessary as provided in the Act. Sometimes the jobs change as they progress, and maybe alterations which will affect the party wall agreement, so that has to be then drafted into the party wall agreement, and then it's more money for everybody at the cost of the building owner. What else are we looking at here? As you can see, it does go on. It's about in disputes and so on and so forth. Right, and then you set your hands, you sign it, and that's a draft. This is a draft one that I sent over to surveyors in central London, and this is the schedule of condition that I did. Very, very basic schedule of condition. Nothing too complex there. So it just relates to the condition of the elements. And don't forget, on this particular property, this is the one where we were building. The building owner was building about 1 meter away from the other property. So this is basically stating the condition of the other property and the fencing, etc. And then a quick look inside, lots of photographs, highlight any particular cracks and so on. And as again, sign up the conditions schedule, and then you provide a list of documents. As you can see, there's 14 documents, which is a method statement, and then plans, then structural plans, and so on. And then they get added to the document once you have agreed the initial draft. So then it gets to the final award, and the final award, once everything is agreed, we have the final award, and the final award, it looks something like this. Now this is a different project I just grabbed so as not to have all the details for any particular project online. Not that there's really an issue with that. What I've done is I've taken various bits from different projects, so make everybody happy, just in case anybody complains. So this is a final award between some chartered surveyors in Battersea, and this is a project in Battersea. So it tells you the projects, tells you who the surveyors are. I'm not a surveyor, and I never ever use any titles. So you got the third surveyor. Now the third surveyor is used for every party wall agreement. It's basically if the building owner's surveyor and the adjoining owner's surveyor fall out or can't agree. Then what happens is, one of the things that we do when creating the framework for the party wall agreement, or the draft, is we appoint we offer up 3 surveyors to the adjoining owner's surveyor, say, and then they will select one, and then he gets written in as the third surveyor. Now the third surveyor never knows until maybe something goes wrong, and then he's called, but you know, he gets a text that says, or he gets an email that says, you are the third surveyor for such and such a project, yeah, and you're now going to have to come in and adjudicate and take over. And that's what the third surveyor is for, in case then the first 2 don't agree. So this is basically the award now, the final award. All the little bits of have been edited to everyone's satisfaction. And we're talking about access, getting in and out, how the work is done. Again, as I say, I did one recently, and it was around 250 pages. So I can tell you now, they do get and can be long. I mean, 250 pages, that's like a book. And that's me drafting. So it's, trust me, it can be difficult. Depends on who you're dealing with, and whether they're very busy. If they're very busy, then great. But if they're not too busy and they want to make some money, then they're going to find fault with everything. And you know, it's a hard slog, I tell you. And the building owner, he obviously has to pay the bill, but at the end of the day, you don't want him to be. If it's something trivial that maybe the other surveyor is on about, you know, what you don't want it, like cutting a tree or how it's cut and so on. You're not going to spend a day arguing about it, emails back and forth. I'm going to win this argument, because the other surveyor is getting £180 an hour. Yeah, maybe I'm only charging £80 an hour. It depends, but I mean, I'm just saying, why wouldn't I would give way on the tree rather than waste the client's money, unless the client unless the client was saying, no, don't let him do that, he's not going to have that, and so on. But yeah, so these things can be quite lengthy. So once everything is all done, basically all we have to do is sign. And then again, it's important that we serve the documents. So part of this award is we discuss the surveyor's fees. This case, this was me getting paid, because I was the adjoining owner's surveyor rather than the building owner's surveyor, and our fees were £9.50 plus VAT. Very simple project. So, in other words, my fees get built into the award to make sure I get paid, and it goes on, authority to carry out under the award is conditional of being commenced within 12 months. So the builders have to basically do the work within 12 months, or started within 12 months. And then what we have, signed by both parties, building owner surveyor and the adjoining owner surveyor. And then what comes after that is the schedule of condition that the building owner's surveyor carried out on the adjoining owner's property. So it's detailed. It's more detailed than what I would normally do. But then he's a chartered surveyor and he has to earn these £180 per hour. So they got to find ways of doing it. That's what we're looking at here. Very professional, very detailed. He's the kind of guy I would absolutely be hiring if the builders were working next door. Anyway, so these are the plans for the project, which are great. And again, the structural plans were added. I asked for that because I want to make sure there's no surprises. I don't want to end up, oh, I didn't know that was happening, etc., etc. So yeah, the structural plans, as in the structural design and the calculations, were added to the project. So that's it. So now you've seen me discuss why. And I'm going to sum up now a little. So you've seen me discuss the kind of project where you would need a party wall surveyor, or you would need a party wall agreement. And I was explaining, as in excavating or carrying out structural works within 3 meters on the excavation, and structural works that will have an effect or be part of the party wall. Like if you were putting in this bit of steel here, that's going into the party wall, and it's got to sit on a lintel or another bit of steel or on a plate. So that means you're cutting a section out on this party wall. That means a party wall agreement. Taking out this chimney breast, party wall agreement. So excavating, digging for this extension, party wall agreement. So that's how it works. So again, after you work out that you need it, then you have to find out who owns next door, who the freeholders are, and that's done through the land registry. That's simple. You pay £3 for the land registry details for any particular property, and those are the ones that get sent the party wall notice. Because you might have tenants next door, and they're not going to help you, so you have to send it to the people who own the property. So that's your actual notice. You let them know what work's gonna. You let them know the the properties and the name of the people who own the properties, etc. And then you tell them what you're going to do, when you're going to do it, and can they consent for the works. And then the adjoining owners have to decide if they're going to or not. If they don't, or they do, the agreed in this, even if it's an agreed surveyor, they then have to prepare draft awards. When you get to the end of it, it's got to be all signed up to create a final award. And the final award will have all the details of the project, all the stipulations, and then it'll generally be attached to that a schedule of conditions for the adjoining property, plus all the plans for the build and the structural calculations or structural design for the project. And that's it. You've then got yourself a party wall award with your adjoining owner. So if you're doing building work, or if you get called for party wall, well, you can always get in touch with us. We'll be happy to deal with it and help you, or even help you get through it. So if you need advice or you need to discuss anything to do with party wall agreements, get in touch. Leave a comment on the video, and we'll get on back to you. But that's about it, really. I've covered intro to the party wall, serving the party wall notice, schedule of conditions, creating the party wall award, and at the end then you serve the notice to all parties, sign notice, and then you look to collect your fees. You send out your invoices. So that's it. Brilliant. Hopefully you have a better understanding of how the party wall legislation works for residential properties. Yeah. Okay, brilliant. If you have a comment, please leave one or leave two. If you'd like to subscribe, we'd be very happy to have you on board. Either way, see you on the next video. Thanks very much for watching. Bye for now.